Yosef was matir evil.
Yes.
No, I don't think it was matir rabbeinu gershom. It was matir evil.
What's weird about it is we're saying Ashkenaz is already preferring chalitza. So why wouldn't you say like?
Because there are other mitzvot. There are other mitzvot. So there are other mitzvot here that may apply, right? So here this is right. So this is Ashkenaz, right? But it's a below ichrim b'yavama.
Why wouldn't you just say okay? So I understand low ichrim, but you could have had like it just.
Now, if someone is miyabein, the question whether it's better to be miyabein or better to be choleit is herem of the question of rabbeinu gershom. Because rabbeinu gershom wasn't talking about this situation. Okay. You also you have the following question in the Rashba. Let's go back to the Shuta Rashba.
First one or the second?
The second one. 1 second.
Yeah, but you said it already. You read it.
The second one, right? Ikar takanatod lo yadati, right? We saw that. And aram lo tikein makom makom, right? She'im kein afilu nashim she'adam mechuyav legarshan mipnei b'fnei mumin, right? V'kofin et haba legaresh mipnei shemimikato. She's damaging him. Afal pishu rotzeh lisa acheret v'shelo legaresh ein shom'in lo. Right? Kedita b'marai hech amar rav shelo yigarshena u'maseh ba liadi mitalmid ashkenazi שהייתה אשתו בעלת מום מאותם שלא היה רשאי לקיימה מחמת התקנה הזו יצא ממקומו, so he wanted to be megarish her, either megarish her bal korcha or to marry someone else, right? So he was in Ashkenaz, so he left Ashkenaz, okay? יצא ממקומו ובא Montpellier. What? Okay. Vishalach, and it came to Montpellier. Vishalach v'sha'ali. V'amarti, it sounds like that's, Montpellier is Provence. Okay, that would fit, that didn't spread to Provence, right? Vishalach v'sha'ali. V'amarti, shemida'ati, ein harav matir et zeh, mipnei shezeh min הדברים asher asurim lahashhot. Ve'eno domeh l'sheva al ta'aseh, ein harav matir, should be ein harav machrim. Ki zeh asur hu lo.
I think, no,
what?
He doesn't allow, no, I think he's not going to allow him to do it.
Allow him to what?
I don't understand what the case is exactly.
The case is that the woman has some sort of illness that it's damaging for the husband to be with her. So he wants to be megaresh, or he wants to marry someone else, right? He wants to go against rabbeinu gershom. So ein harav matir et zeh shezeh min hadvarim asher asurim lahashhot.
Because you're not supposed to. It's not just that you're not allowed to marry another. You're not allowed to keep that first wife because she's.
So then he's not matir to marry someone else. Okay.
Right, because he doesn't want you keeping the first wife.
Okay.
He wants you to divorce the first wife.
Okay. Ubisha sheshahata. Okay, could be. Ubisha sheshahata im ba'ala. I skipped a little bit. Sheshahata im ba'ala 10 shanim v'lo yalda. Shemechuyav lisa acheret mishum pirya v'rivya. Ani savur delo tikein bazeh harav. He didn't make the takana either, right? That not to megarish bal korcha. Right? He can be. She doesn't want to accept the get. He megarish her, or lisa acheret aleha. Okay, chen rabbeinu gershom does not apply in that situation. Mikol makom beit tikein, boim lo tikein, right? Whatever it is, whether it's mitikein b'makom mitzvah or not mitikein b'makom mitzvah, or tat takana lo pashta b'chol pulateinu, etc. Okay?
So he's willing to entertain the idea that he might have been mitikein.
Yeah, and maybe it applies, but he said it doesn't matter in Montpellier. It doesn't apply because it didn't exist. So he doesn't. As a posek, just has to get a good enough answer, right, to answer the question, and then he doesn't have to go back and figure out.
But he's willing to entertain that he could have been
yes.
talking even in a case of a divorce.
Yeah, it could have, right? Sure. Okay. In the Maharik,
there's a Montpellier.
there's Montpellier. Yeah, I'm not sure the.
It's in Provence.
Right, I know. But obviously, this is someplace in France. It's Mont something,
Yeah,
right?
Montpellier.
And before they knew about Canada, before Canada, so it wasn't Montreal, right? Anyway, well, there was a place called Har'el over there also. Okay. Maharik. Okay. V'lo od ela b'nesuad gura. Hitir Rashba b'tshuva lisa isha acheret hecha sheyatzta mida'at. Okay, so the woman went crazy. Okay, so the woman can't accept a get, right? There's no if a woman, it says v'shilchami beito v'halcha v'ayta li'ish acher yatz'a zo shemishalcha v'chozeret. She doesn't understand what gershom is. A man can't be megarish his wife. She doesn't have da'at. Okay.
Is there any discussion that you know of that raises the question of the immorality of divorcing a wife who will then be totally vulnerable and unable to support herself because she?
So he can't divorce her.
I know, but is that a technical thing or moral?
That's up to you to. You can decide. That has to do with how many.
I asked you if you know
I don't
anything
know.
if the rabbis also discussed. This could be in more than one.
There's this whole thing about the Gida Be'esh Nurecha and the chiyuvim that the Baal has in terms of refuah and things like that. That's part of the chiyuvei ketubah, is the rakotah, liftotah, right? So, if it wasn't in the contract, would he redeem her? Would he pay for the medical bills? So, if they care for each other, he would, and if they don't, and if he didn't, then he wouldn't. So that's why they had to put it in the contract, because Chazal thought that should be part of his responsibilities, right? But he can always be megaresh. We'll talk about grounds for divorce when we talk. The first thing we'll talk about when we learn Gittin, we'll talk about grounds for divorce. Whether under what circumstances it's mutar megaresh. But if she is of sound mind, he can be megaresh her even if he's sick. It's not a nice thing to do. He can do it. Okay. Anyway. So let's see what the Rashba said here. So he quotes the Rashba. V'zel shano, hashila b'tshuva ze kama yamim isha, okay, asher natan Hashem imadi midat hadin pag'a ba v'dolelet sichla v'da'ata niskal v'ein badat lahara o lehetiv v'ata mori hatzila nafshi mishachat v'horeini im ani rasha lisa acheret ustom pi apotchim Im yal'igu lomar shelo kedin asiti machmat chemer benu gershom. Okay, that was the question. Shuva takanat rabbeinu gershom lo ra'iti v'lo nitpashek b'chol artzeinu v'adat noteh shelo gazar takanato b'chol anashim u'v'chol ha'megarshim shelo asa ela ligdor mipnei ha'pritzim v'ha'olim v'ha'me'olalim b'neshoteihem shelo kara'ui aval lo al dat נתפשט תקנתו אפילו באותם שאמרו חכמים שיוציאו שלא בכתובה וכולי. It was to control, you could say this has to do with, broadly speaking, with the issue of znut and yuchsin. In other words, what you want stable families. And in this situation, actually, you want to also protect the wife from abuse. And they didn't think it was abusive just to bring home another wife. That wasn't right. But a husband was being irresponsible, and that was a previous case of somebody that ran away with the shifcha. That is where he made the herem. It was to rein in irresponsible and insensitive behavior. What right?
case is that referring to? Or is it that they could divorce her?
In cases where Chazal said that a man should divorce his wife, so rabbeinu gershom didn't get in the way of that.
But is he applying it to the case of the crazy woman or not applying it to the case
Yes, he's applying to the case of the crazy woman that he can be nosei acheret aleha, because it's not. Because what could he do, right? He can't live with a woman who's crazy. So
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Why would he say a makom? Why would he be referring to a makom that Chachamim say you could divorce her without it.
Because this person is being responsible. But in places where you have to be megaresh, or where it's not irresponsible to be megaresh, or it's not irresponsible to take another wife under extreme circumstances. So Rabbeinu Gershom wasn't gozer there. He only was gozer like to keep society stable and to save the wife from ha'holalim v'ha'me'olilim b'nishoteihem. Right, so it's not only to keep the family stable, but it's also these people. It was abusive to the women, so to protect them, so he can't bring home another wife. Okay, right? Lo zasat tzadik takana elam nea peritzim shetolim ma'asehem b'dvarim b'teilim v'be'elu she'amru shehu min adin o min ha'chiyuv legaresh o lisa acheret v'zeh lo gazar harav afilo ya takana olamit. That's what we talked about at the time, right? So when there's a mitzvah lisa acheret, right, whether it's yibum or his first wife can't have children, so there the option is either to divorce or lisa acheret. So if he doesn't want to divorce her, he can be no se acheret. So that Rabbeinu Gershom never asked her. Okay, so that's what we have from the Rashba. Okay,
this is Rashba or Marid?
That was the Marid quoting the Rashba. Okay, the
whole thing is, the whole thing is
yeah.
Is the Rashba? It's not the Marid himself.
I think he goes with it. Right.
We really don't know. Like if Rabbeinu Gershom had any,
we don't know.
Caveats. Like we don't know.
We don't know, right? They're just trying to figure. We don't know. It's not written down any place. That's the problem. In the Shulchan Aruch, it says 2 dayot whether it applies b'makom mitzvah, right? Doesn't see if yud, right? Rabbeinu Gershom hichrim al nosei al ishto, aval b'yevama lo hichrim. Okay. We'll talk about Arusah in a minute. In the Shut Haran, here's where, in the second Shut Haran, Simon Memchet. So this is where he treats Rabbeinu Gershom more severely than other minhagim, even if you say it's Yitzhak minhag. Because the question was asked, well, the guy started in Sarfat, and then he wound up in Makom Shenahagu Shtei Nashim. So can he then get married? He's not gato lachzor to Sarfat, right? So he says, the person that asked him said, "Can you do?" He says, "It's Makom Shehalach L'Sham ve'ein gato lachzor," according to the rules that you find in Makom Shenahagu. Yeah. So he says, "Elu dvarecha," okay. So you go according to Minhag HaMakom.
The Eilu Dvarecha is where?
And then towards a little bit past the middle, right? He quotes the Shoel, right? This is the Ran. And then he says, V'heim etzli. You see? Look where I am here. This is the Ran. V'heim etzli. It's more than 50% of the way down. V'heim etzli divrei tema. The matnitin the perek makom shenagu eina inyan lanidon shelefaneinu klal. Right? The hata mayri b'minhag shenagu anshei ha'ir me'atzman. V'otam ha'minhagim hein nikba'im al derech zeh she'adam chashuv be'ir manhig isur b'davar. How does it happen? Makom shenagu. It's very interesting. How does minhag start? Right? So somebody in the city who was important, that people looked at him as a role model, he started being knowing a minhag, right? Manhig isur b'davar echad, lasot siyag l'torah, ubnei yiro nishma'im elav, v'noagim isur b'davar, ubnei achreihem, mipnei sharu avotayhem, shayu noagim isur b'davar, ateim noagim isur k'motam, dor achar dor. That's how it starts. One person says Chalav Yisrael, the kids like it, and everybody's knowing that way. Dor achador. V'chol mi sheba la'ota ir, gam ken chayav l'nhog k'minhagam, hey, mitakanat chachamim. So that's a takanat chachamim that you go according to minhag HaMakom. U'bechi ha'gav nevadai mi sheyatza misham ve'ein dato lachzor ein notnim alav chumrei oto makom sheyatza misham. Right? It's a new place. It's a new life. Okay? Aval Beit Din Hagadol Sheichrim Davar Echad Al Kol Anshe Glilotav Alehem V'al Zar'am. Right? Echoes of Megillas Esther, right? Alehem as the Kibluhu Alehem, right? I don't know when he wrote this tshuva, okay? But the Megillah was on his mind, right? The Kiblu Alehem Eini Ro'eh Mitoch Otam Mishnah. That's not relevant to the Mishnah in Pesachim about Makom Shenahagu, because this was a gzeira on his entire kihila. It was a gzeira. D'chol heicha she'echad mibnei bneihen me'oto she'acherem hayachal alav ba'odo b'mkomo shenomar sh'mibnei she'yatzam b'mkomo yehei mesulak acher me'alav lefi shecherem ze ein hamakom. You don't say that. That's impossible. Lefi shecherem ze ein hamakom gorei moto ela akarkafta de gavri rami. It's chal on people's heads. Because you are part of this kihila, the cherem was chal on you. There's no escape. It's not that in this place they were knowing this way. Rabbeinu Gershom made a cherem on everybody in this area. It's not that it was a minhag that developed. Right? It's a cherem. So that doesn't depend on makom. If you were part of this, you were a descendant of this kihila, then the cherem applies to you. Okay?
Do we see anything after this time period that any cherem or halach pronouncement that gets enacted with such scope and force?
Yom Tov Sheni Shegalios.
What was that?
Yom Tov Sheni Shegalios.
That's after this?
No, it's not after that. It's how you understand Yom Tov Sheni Shegaliot. Yom Tov Sheni Shegaliot, I don't get the whole thing, but the Baal Ma'or says it's minha gadol shepashat etzel kol b'nei hagolah. And therefore, you have to, if you're in Chutz La'aretz, I don't know if you want to listen to this, the Ben Eretz Yisrael Chutz La'aretz has to hold 2 days Yom Tov. Because even if you plan on coming back, because it's a minhag gadol shepashat etzel kol b'nei hagolah, that the laws of Makom Shenahagu do not apply to Yom Tov Sheni Shegaliot. It's a different type of minhag. For example, so that's when I said Yom Tov Sheni Shegaliot before as an example of a minhag, that's what I was thinking. It's not stam a minhag. It's a very powerful minhag. As we all know, anybody from Chutz La'aretz, right? It's Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. You don't feel right. It's Yom Tov, so that's Yom Tov. So Ben Eretz Yisrael goes to Chutz La'aretz. You have to hold 2 days. Okay? According to that. Okay?
This guy just made the mistake. He should have started off in Tashdila and then moved to.
But what do you want? The guy came from Ashkenaz.
And then moved to, yeah.
But if we don't look at Rabbeinu Gershom, but we look at whatever was coordinated in the Ramban, that's the Mucha, for sure if we move it's irrelevant because it's whatever the original marriage was.
Right. That would also be true. That would also be true. Right. Okay. Okay. So we have, in terms of we talk about various reasons, right? We talk about reasons that the Gemara has for limiting one wife, right? But we have with regards to Rabbeinu Gershom, one is Mishum Ktata. Where do we see that? In the Shut HaRashba, now referring to Rabbeinu Gershom, there's an allusion to Ktata. He says, in the first Shut HaRashba, right? Chelik Aleph. Okay? So he says, Ukvar Mishanim Kadmoniyot. In the end of the Shut HaRashba, like 4 or 5 lines from the end. Okay? The first Shut HaRashba. Ukvar Mishanim Kadmoniyot, Yichrim Agon Rabbeinu Gershom Ma'or Nei HaGolah. Zal Kol Mi She'isa Isha L'Ishto. V'afilu Bat Zuga Shel Ishto HaKshera. V'kol Shekein Kazo. Right? Even if the woman is a worthy Sarah. It's the same social.
Like 6, 7 lines from the bottom.
6, 7 lines from the bottom before the Shut HaRashba Chelik.
Right below, a little below where there's these slanty lines that say you like Tzarech Lomar Le'itolel.
Yeah, right before that. Right
You
after
see,
that.
Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
Okay.
then about a line below that.
Okay. Ushnayim ushlosha hayu baratzot ha'elu. Now remember, he's in a place where there isn't we're not knowing Rabbeinu Gershom. He says Ushnayim shlosha hayu baratzot ha'elu shenasku isha rishona machmat shelo hayu lahem toladot min harishona. Right, where it was mutter. Ve'im kol zeh lo asu ela la'achar kama piyusin. and they had to beg their first wife to agree. I think the piyusin is, right? Okay? V'im kol zeh lo ra'inu be'echad mehem she'ala zivugam yafeh. Okay? So, and that's where he says, "Ukilachem ha'mekudash asher yatsa lehem shem ba'artzot hakodesh ech yitnu yad lekeyotzei bazeh," like this creep, right? L'shloach bachurim be'avlat yedeihem v'yilamdu harabim lahakel b'bnot Avraham v'ra'ui l'kahal chasidim chachamim u'nuvonei davar k'motam lahachmicho la'ashiv ishto rishona v'la'asot siyag ladavar. Right? Get him, he's got to throw this shifcha out and take his first wife back. Okay? So here we have the issue of tata. It says, even where it was mutter, and the herem b'gershom didn't apply, and it was because there was no in order to mekayim puravu, lo ala zivug yafeh. Okay? So you have an issue of tata here as well, in the context of herem rabbeinu gershom. He's not saying that the tam of rabbeinu gershom is mishum tata, but he's saying not to have more than one wife is mishum tata. Okay? Which is pretty close to saying that. Okay?
It's not recommended.
What?
It's not recommended.
It's not recommended, right? It'd be interesting to see the life expectancy of these people.
No, it's not. No, he's specifically mentioning a specific context. I mean, I was asking, the reasons why somebody who's marrying a second wife could be important.
What do you mean? I'm not sure what you said. Say again?
In other words, maybe that this isn't working if in the case because the woman is feeling, oh my gosh, he thinks she's. In other words, as opposed to
he's saying that having a second wife just doesn't really work. Okay, even in those days. Okay, the Chatam Sofer has an interesting chiddush. Says in the third paragraph of Chatam Sofer. The third paragraph of Chatam Sofer.
I have to find
the V'lei b'nistafina l'chadesh davar shelo izkira gonim akadmonim. He's going to say something about Rabbeinu Gershom, right? Hava amina, I would say, the Rabbeinu Gershom already came beit takanot. Echad shelo yigaresh bal korcha. Says v'hi ikarit v'kolelet v'nitkabla b'chol makom k'mo shektuv b'tshuvat Haran. Okay, so the two Chemei Rabbeinu Gershom that are relevant to our discussion, one is shelo yigaresh isha bal korcha, and the second, of course, shelo yisa isha lishto. So it says the first one is the original herem, and that was accepted everywhere. Okay. V'idach,
That's true. It's from exception.
must be. No. V'idach shelo yisa beit nashim, and the second herem is they should marry two wives. V'ota lo nitpashta kol kach.
Well, that's it.
That's true. That's lo nitpashta kol kach, right? He must have known. Okay. Ve'ena ela mishum ktata. Okay. Udelo matzi lemeikam b'sipukaihu ukilatvei. So he mentions two reasons, which are in the Gemara, right? And he's giving the reasons that appear in the Gemara. He's giving them as the reasons for Herem Rabbeinu Gershom. One is mishum ktata, and also for economic reasons. Udelo matzi lemeikam b'sipukaihu.
what's kilatvei?
What? Ukilatvei. It's yoter kal from the first herem, right? The first herem was mitkabel b'chol makom shelo yigaresh isha bal korcha. The second herem lo yisa shtei nashim. That's more kal. Okay, k'mo shektuv b'darkei Moshe. Okay, v'nirali dehashnayim talia b'rishona, dashniat tluya b'rishona. That the two haramim are related to each other. Achar shegazar shelo yigaresh bal korcha. Okay, so now what do you have? The person wants to megarish his wife, whatever reason. Now she doesn't want to accept the get. So now, okay, so I'll marry someone else. So that's why Rabbeinu Gershom had to come in order to make the first takana effectual. He had to make the second takana in order to make the herem, that a man can't be megaresh his wife bal korcha, he had to then make another herem that a man can't have two wives. Okay? Achar shegazar shelo yigaresh bal korcha, ulefamim al korcho lo lirtzono yadur im nachash b'kfifa achat. Al yidei zeh yisa isha lishto v'yidrabu ktatot. Right? Now you create a situation where normally you wouldn't marry more than one wife. But by making him megaresh only if she agrees, you create a situation which you don't want. Right? So yidrabu ktatot b'batei Yisrael. Right? Va'aniyot machzirot al ptachim delo matzim lemekam slibu chaychu nimtza takanato shelo legaresh bal korcho kalkalahi al kein chazar v'tikein shelo lisa beit nashim. Okay? But in a situation where you can't be megaresh bal korcho, you can be no say beit nashim, makom mitzvah. Okay? So his understanding, the reason I'm reading this, is that his understanding of the reasoning behind herem rabbeinu gershom is mishum kitata. Okay? And so we have mishum kitata and the makeup of sipukayu is connected to also, I think it says, also connected to kitata and beyond kitata also. Okay? The Rush talks about yuchsin. Let's go back to the Rush here.
It's funny because you would assume, I would hope that the reason you can't divorce someone against their will has to do with like respect for the other person, how she feels, blah blah blah.
Right.
And so then it's just funny so we've accepted that, but then like we don't apply that to the second. Like we're just going to go to it's going to be annoying to you. You're going to have fights. Why not apply that same reasoning to the second one as well and say, well, the reason you wouldn't want to marry another person when you're the first one is because of how she'll feel and what would be appropriate, and looking at her as a unique being. Like,
okay, I mean, yeah. I mean, you could try to include it in there. Maybe tata is something that was found in the Gemara, so use that. I mean, okay, the whole thing is obviously some sort of awareness that you can't have, a man shouldn't have more than one wife. Let's see, in the Shir HaRush, the Rush talks about, hold on one second.
I said one other thing.
Hold on one second. Here, in the short tshuva, Klal Mem Gimel Zayin. The Shir HaRush. It's right after the Rashba on the Maharik. Okay, so he says. Nahagu kan, this is the question. Pchutim ugruim liba'alei melachot. Lisa hayom isha b'makom zeh. V'notein einav ba'acheret. V'holech l'makom acher. V'noseh ota. V'chozer l'makomo ba'azut metzach. U'ba'im lidei ktatot v'tar'omot. V'gerushin shalom kidat. ועתה אנו מחלים פני מורנו לדק בדבר, ולכתוב לנו הסכמה וגדרות הפרצה הזאת בראיות נכוחות. להיות לנו לפה למליץ בהכרחת אלו השולטים. ונוסרו כל הנשים. I guess too.
Means be abused?
I think that they should send away their other wives. Okay, so the Rush says that Asher kataft al pchutim shenosim isha b'mkomchem notnim eineihem b'isha acheret v'olchim al makom acher v'nosim isha roi lasot geder b'siyag b'davar zeh ki anu raboteinu umal'ah haaretz zima zeh anoseh isha b'mkom zeh v'holech l'makom acher v'noseh acheret nimtza ach noseh et achoto v'gam ma'agein eshet neurim. So he goes away, and the one that he was married to before, she's stuck someplace else. L'chein tovu sheyaskimu hakal lasot takana l'davar charamot v'niduyim u'knasot. Okay, al mi she'isa isha acheret al ishto b'makom acher v'im tishalchu li hatakana asher taskimu miyoter ani maskim imachem ve'echtom aleha. So obviously in a place where there was no herem rabbeinu gershom, right? but he's willing to enact a takana of a herem to enforce what the Gemara says in Yuma, the lo yisadam isha b'makom achad v'makom acher, right? It's clear that the concern here is not only zima, right? It's just the whole behavior, the way these people describe, it's creeps, right? The whole behavior is unbecoming, and that's why you should make the zera. Okay?
What is
So
the gershom lo kadat? What exactly is happening?
I'm not
She's
sure.
just so annoyed she's leaving him the first
Maybe, or maybe it's there's no ground, and this has to do with grounds for divorce. A person can't just, it's usher for a man just to divorce his wife because he's tired of her. Right? That's the Deot Shonot in the last Mishnah in Gittin, right? So maybe that's what he means in Gershom Shelo Kedat, and he's stam megarisher because Yatsa Na'ahimena, right? And that's, we don't pass him that way. Maybe that's Gershom Shelo Kedat. Or maybe it's something broader than that, that the families fall apart, and then we don't want families to fall apart. I'm not sure exactly what he means. I assume that he means Gershom Shelo Kedat, that's Al Pi Halacha, the Gershom were Asurim. Not that she left Stam, because that's not Gershom. And I think it probably means that he was Megaresh Shelo Kedat. She's Megureshet, but it wasn't justified, according to the Halacha.
I'd like to understand the Rosh doesn't mention rabbeinu gershom.
Not in this context.
Did he mention it? I didn't lay my eyes on it quick. Did he mention it in another context? Do we have
Yeah, that
proof
we
that
have,
the Rosh knew about takanat rabbeinu gershom?
1 second. Does he mention Gershom? 1 second. 1 second.
Yeah.
In the next tshuva.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because a person took a shvua and he wants to be garish bal. He wants to go against rabbeinu gershom in order to be makayim his shvua. So he doesn't let him.
Okay.
Yeah. In the bottom he says, "V'lo de l'sha'anu muchzakin sheyesh cherem hakihilot b'davar o takanat rabbeinu gershom zal." Again, it's in historic. They didn't know what it was. They just knew that was usher. It's either takanat hakihilot, some vague takana, or it's takanat rabbeinu gershom. V'davar ze pashat isuro b'chol Yisrael. That's the isur l'garesh al korcha. Right? Shelo shamanu v'lo ra'inu isha mitgareshet ba'al korcha.
I guess the question
So
is
maybe
this.
he only identifies that as takanat.
Maybe.
I'm curious what, since we don't have the actual takana, I'm curious what the earliest source we have here is.
Where it's first mentioned?
Yeah. Or where we were said.
It's mentioned pretty early on. It's in Chuvas of Rashi.
Okay. It's early enough.
It's pretty early.
That's about as early as we're going to get.
I think that's as early as you're going to get. It's not in Perush Rabbeinu Gershom al Hashas someplace. We just don't have it, right? So, but it's an old Masorah. Rami Rittenberg writes it's Balei Tosafot, right? It's quoted in the name of Balei Tosafot. Okay, so we have 4 reasons given for Chem Rabbeinu Gershom. Tata, Yuchsin, Mishum Aprutzim, right?
Where's the
Basically, he said that the guys that they would meet someone, so they would travel and meet someone else, and the Rush says Ra'ui L'Dor.
You won't know who your brothers and
No,
sisters
I
are.
understand that, but I
Yeah.
thought that's because it was just
That-
quoting the Gemara. It didn't sound
No,
like
but
that.
he's saying it's Ra'ui L'Hachrim Al Davar Zeh. Right? It's not Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom per se, but he sees a reason to make a Cherem for the reason that the Gemara gives. Right? The Gemara doesn't mention a Cherem. The Gemara just says it's awesome. Right?
And what was the second reason?
So the first.
One is Mishum Tata, the other is because of Yochsin, the third is because of the Prutzim that we saw, and the fourth, of course, is what we saw Rabbi Yaakov Emden, Christian, negative Christian influence. Which
But earlier also just expectations when they got married.
Right. But that's not found in Rabbeinu Gershom as a reason for Rabbeinu Gershom. That could be independent. If you have a makom, how did that makom come to be? Shelo nohagim yoter mi'isha achat. It could be that the reason we have this minhag here is because of Chem Rabbeinu Gershom, right? And for any of the other reasons. But then another reason would come into it, then it would be usher for him, even if it's mitzad a minhag and not mitzad a cher, it would be usher because al dat kain lo itziva.
Right.
What was the
last reason?
And what about Munah? You also said.
The last reason I said before was the Yavetz. It's just it was a hashba'an and sweet.
No, the reason for herem wasn't mentioned. You said 4 reasons.
I don't think
Yeah,
it's
so-
rabbeinu gershom. I don't know.
No, it's not explicitly rabbeinu gershom, right? But it's a reason to make a herem. That's my point. Okay?
But you also, you said
Yeah.
earlier, oh no. You also said something.
Oh, right, right.
What'd you say?
It'll
You said it,
complicate
just
the-
remember that at the beginning of this year, you gave 3 reasons. Fights, yochsin, and ona.
Right.
And now you're giving
And
4.
what?
Wait, you didn't give Onah's reason.
I
You
didn't.
gave Umdana.
That was, but I was just deriving from the Gemara. Though. In the beginning, I didn't get reason for rabbeinu gershom. I was looking in the Gemara to see reasons why Chazal might not be happy with a man having more than one wife, right? And then now, what of those reasons is applied to the rationale for rabbeinu gershom? Ktata is applied. Lamekel L'Sipur Kayu is applied. Ktata is related, right? The Chasam Sofer thinks that it's Mishum Ktata, right? So we'll see that in a minute.
When
Okay?
Rosh Hashanah again, Eshet Nurim. That was like a new idea, no?
No, because there's people running away from their wives.
So,
So you got to stop them. The guy got
so
married.
What would
and
you
he
call?
re-
I understand why he's saying it, but what? So what are you calling that? That's
To
similar
protect the
to
woman.
So that wasn't one of the ones you just
Oh, right,
listed.
No.
that's also an important reason.
I'm just pointing out.
Right,
that he said that
yes.
first line.
But that's because they're running away, right? Yeah. To protect the woman.
There are lots of reasons.
There are lots of reasons, okay? Not the least of which is not mentioned by anybody as it's Pikuach Nefesh, because she'll kill him. But, okay, there's another issue here, and that is, can the woman be mochel? So in general, if there's a takana that's made in someone's benefit, right? Because we have this in Ketubot. A woman can say, right, the takana is that tiknu la, that she has to give maaseh yadeha leba'ala because he gives her mizonot. Okay? So it's a takana letovata, right, that he should give the mizonot freely and without eva. So they said she has to give her maaseh yadayim, money that she earns. So what if she says, "Eini mizonot ve'eini osa"? I'm Michael Taivus, as they say. I don't want to mizonot ve'eini osa, right? Can she say, "Ef she v'takanat chachamim"?
Yes.
The takanat chachamim is made for my benefit. I'm Michael, right?
A lot of these reasons.
So that's very interesting. So can here, right? You're such a good husband. I think I'm not enough for you, right? So I'm Michael, right? That you could have another wife. So if narrowly speaking, it's the takana is to protect the wife, so then mechila could work, maybe, right? If it's in the broader things of ktata, well, maybe then ktata also, if she agrees, then we think there won't be ktata. I'm just trying to...
Can I clarify that?
Right,
Because
but if
I
it's,
think because in the case of Bizonot and Maaseh Yadayim, he can also say, I'm only going to marry you on the condition of, and if she agrees, then she... So
no,
it's
that's
not
makna
just-
masha ketub Torah. Yeah, so you can't do that. You can't say,
It's Dvarim Shemamon, you can make whatever conditions you want. It doesn't have to be the Tovat, like you're saying it's the Tovat Isha, but they're the...
No, I'm just giving you an example. If you have a takana, any takana that's made with tovat somebody, I can say ef she takanat chachamim.
I know, but when Dvarim Shemamon, T'nai Kayam, and it doesn't have to be about her protection. It can also be because he doesn't want, if they...
Yeah, but the Gemara there connects it. I'm just giving you as an example. The Gemara there in
Yeah,
Ketubot
but you're
connects it,
connecting
but
it
ef
with
she
protection,
takanat
and I'm saying
chachamim.
it's not clear to me that it has to be about her protection. He can also
It's
change the
l'tovat.
condition.
If it's l'tovat, he can't say if she b'takanat chachamim, if she b'tchem rabbeinu gershom. It's not wasn't made for him. If it was made,
But he can do about
that's not relevant. So there's a takana that's made l'tovat a person, right? Just so we talked about the takana that the hakna of the get, right? So can she say if she b'takanat chachamim, right? I don't want to be able to makna the get to him, right? In any case, so the what's interesting here is in the Shut Haran, he talks about this, and it's very insightful. It's really pretty obvious.
Which
He
one?
says, one second. He says, let me just find it. At the in Mem Chet, right? The last paragraph, the second paragraph in the Shut Haran, you see? Sima Mem Chet. Midat ha'isha bazeh yesh ladun. De'efshir de midat ha'isha yesh lo heter. If the wife agrees, I'm at the end of the Shut Haran Siman Memchet.
The second paragraph.
Page 5.
Second paragraph.
Okay? אבל מידת האישה בזה יש לדון, דאפשר מידת האישה יש לו היתר. ולא עוד על שיש לדון, שאפילו היתר אין צריך, שכיוון שחרם זה לתקנת האישה נעשה, והיא אומרת אי אפשי בתקנת חכמים כגון זו, שומעים לה. ואינו צריך היתר. You don't even have to find the heter. You don't need your Be'er Rabbanim or whatever you might need if she agrees. If she agrees, then there's no gzeira in the first place. Okay, here's an example. And he says, Ela shani mefakpek bazeh. See, I skipped a little bit. Ki shema herem zeh. First of all, lo l'takanat nashim bilvad naaseh, ela af l'takanat anashim. Right? It's an eitz tov mesim, or it's tova. You might want more than one wife, but it's really not so healthy, not good for your health. So it's l'tovato. So she can't agree because the takanat is mishum k'tata, takes two to tango. Right? So it's a takana in general that Chazal made, not l'tovata. L'tovat society, maybe l'tovat mishpacha, l'tovat society, maybe it's for yuchsin. Any of these things, any of these reasons for the cherem would say that the takana is not specifically l'tovata, so she can't be mocha. If the takana is only in a narrow view to protect the woman from a baal who's mitolel ba, right? Then you could raise the possibility, we'll see why it's not pashut in a second, then you could raise the possibility that she should be able to be mochel. Why is that not pashut? Yes, that's what he says. It's obvious, right? First of all, lo takanat nashim levad. Nase af takanat ha'anashim. Kidei shelo yachnisu mevriya b'tok beitam. V'chol kahai gav lecherem beitin hagadol rabbeinu gershom אי אפשר להתירו, ולא עוד, אלא שאפילו נאמר שלתקנת האישה בלבד נעשה, right? אפשר כי הרב ז"ל, רבנו גרשום, חשש שמתוך שהנשים כפופות לבעליהן, אם יספיק נתינת רשותה להתיר החרם מדעתה, שמא יקניתה בעלה עד שתרצה. לפיכך איני מכניס עצמי בנידון זה, אלא אני מניח הדבר לחכמים הצרפתים, שהם יודעים איך פשטה תקנה זו במקומם, ואיך היו נוהגים בה, שעל פי אותו הדרך ראוי לנהוג ולהורות. I don't know, I live in hunky-dory land, I can have two wives. In Tzarfat, let them break their heads, right? And whatever they were knowing, they were knowing. But there's something very insightful here, which is pretty obvious, that you can't say there's mechilah when you have a weaker party, because, right? You can't say that mechilah. In order to, even if it's just to protect the woman, in order to protect the woman, you have to say that you can't be mochelet. Okay? So that's what we have here. That's what's present mechilah. Okay? The last thing is which women does it apply to? Because what we have from Cherem ben Gershom is lo yikach isha al ishto. What about, there's an interesting case here. At the same, yeah, of course, at the same time, right? The case was as follows. Look at this case from Hagot HaMordechai. Okay, Reish Tzadi Aleph. It's in the one in the Rashi print. Yeah, Ketubot. Al Bachur Echad Sheshidech Bat Yisrael. I think that means that he was Mekadesh. Okay, but there was no chuppah yet. Okay, there wasn't ensuing. That's what I think. Okay, the kodem shekinsa, before the chuppah, nafla lo yivama, his brother died, and now he has to be miyabein or choletz, either one, right? Im yachol lichnos hameshudechet kodem shiachlos liyivimto. What's the issue? He has an arusa, okay, and he has a shomeret yavama. If there's, since we hold that a shomeret yavam, even before the yibum takes place, it's called yesh zika. In other words, she is in some sense his wife already. She is somehow related to him, right? The kiddushin of the ishut of the dead brother gets transferred to the live brother. Okay, now's not time to go into trying to understand what that's about. You look at this Tosot about it in the beginning of kiddushin. It's like 50 plot in Yevamot to try to figure it out. So it's basically saying that the Yevamah is, since she nafla lefanav, right? So therefore, it's as if he's married already. As if is the operative term here, right? To some degree, he's considered married. So can he marry his arusa before he does chalitza to the yevama? Because if he marries his arusa, so at that point he will have two wives, right? Ki avia, okay, listen to this. The father of the arusa, rotzel akev al yado, ulechofo shiachlotz la. He said, no, you're not marrying my daughter until you give chalitza. Okay?
He's very smart.
He's very smart. That's what you need fathers for. Ve'emet hadavar, the kaimelan, the yesh zika, afilu betray achi. There were two brothers. Before either one of them was miyabein or choletz, that she has zika to both those brothers. Okay? Kirav Ashi, okay, let's get into the Yevamot Sugya now. Okay, Ach im shayach l'cherem ha'gaon, this is the question, mishtei nashim, de l'chaora lo gazar milisa isha, kozman dahach skuka lo, de lo gazar el shelo yisa atzmo, mi'atzmo l'shtei nashim, v'hakaman de lo asrinan le, lo be'ishto, v'lo be'yivimto, im hu nasui. Okay, so he's saying, this is the assumption, right? The Chem Rabbeinu Gershom does not apply to Makom Mitzvah, right? So then, there's no Chem Rabbeinu Gershom. Of course, that he could marry his Arusa, and then still be married, and then have this relationship with Yivama. It's not a transgression of Chem Rabbeinu Gershom. V'adil lechatchila yisa, v'davar zeh talui b'kabbalah, v'atem yedatem kula, v'od kevan shekadam, listen, v'shidech, קודם שנפלה לייבום, איך תאסור עליו המשודכת משום חרם הקהילות. Even if you want to say that חרם rabbeinu gershom applies in the case of Yivama, okay? You're going to say that because of the chayrim of not being allowed to marry two wives, that he can't marry his arusa because of the Yavam, because of the Yivama. Who came first? She came first. The arusa came first. Halo gam ala meshudechet aleha chala hachayrim shelo yisa acheret. She's an arusa. So because he has an arusa, look, the lashon is al ishto. What's ishto? Ishto glura is an isua. So what they're talking about is two things. What's the status of a shomeret yavam? And what's the status of an arusa? Right? So he says the chemer gershom applies to her. In other words, with regards to her, he's already married to her, so he can't be miyabein. Right? Im kain adrabah. Hamishudechet te'asor alav yivimto, v'lo yivimto hamishudechet, ki hi kadma. Okay, so this is the diyun. So he decides that he can marry. He can marry. He doesn't have to wait for. He doesn't have to wait for chalitza, right? There was a case here. 1 second. Here, look at the Chatam Sofer. Similar case.
But therefore, that means that he is considering.
That means
Exactly. He might
that having an arusa, to add someone to an arusa is also a second wife. You don't say, well, she's not a nisu'ah. Right? If you look in the Shulchan Aruch, then you understand what the
v'chein ba'arusa is very difficult to understand which way.
But now you understand it. He says if v'chein in the Shulchan Aruch, it says
Chal on the rabbeinu gershom and not chal on the yivama.
it's not chal on yivama and it's not chal on arusa.
Meaning v'chein ba'arusa is referring back to rabbeinu gershom.
Yes. Yeah. One second. Where is it?
It's a really weird sentence.
Yes, it's a weird sentence. But yeah, this rabbeinu gershom hichrim al nosei al ishto. Right? Aval b'yivama lo hichrim. Okay. If a person has a shomeret yavam, he can marry someone. And he's not considered transgressing Chen Rabbeinu Gershom because he wasn't miyabei mota, right? Mm-hmm. If it was miyabei mota, then he can't marry someone else, right? V'chein ba'arusa
goes back on the Rabbeinu Gershom.
Yes, right. There's no gzeran arusa. Im eino rotzeh lichnos.
Where are you?
Wait.
Yud. Im eino rotzeh lichnos. 1 second. That it doesn't apply. I mean, if you.
Rabbeinu Gershom applies to Arusa or doesn't apply to Arusa?
It doesn't apply. Aval v'yivama lo hichrim v'chein ba'arusa lo hichrim. That means if a man has an arusa, he can marry someone else and be kones. And because an arusa is not considered ishto le'inyan chen Rabbeinu Gershom. Just like a yivama is not considered ishto le'inyan chen Rabbeinu Gershom. Okay, good, but that's what it means. No, the im. Hold on. Im. Listen. Im eino rotzeh lichnos el liftor. If his intention is to be megarish the arusa, if his intention, he has an arusa, and now he marries someone else. So he's allowed to marry someone else because the arusa is not considered his wife. That's provided that he has intention to be megarish the arusa, right? If his intention is to be kones the arusa, right?
Then what does he do first?
Oh, so he says he doesn't have to be megarish the arusa first, as long as he intends to be megarish the arusa. That's good enough. And it's not a transgression of Chen Rabbeinu Gershom to marry another woman, even though he had. Right, it would be also to marry the arusa. He has to give her a get, or otherwise he makes her iguna.
But the father-in-law wants.
No, this is a different.
This is a different case.
Different
but
case.
In the other case,
The father-in-law says.
In the other case, the father-in-law wants to protect his daughter.
Yes, I want to make sure that there's no one else in the picture. You give chalitza first, then you marry my daughter.
And that's not a problem.
That's for sure okay. The question is whether you have to do that.
Whether you can reverse the order.
Whether you can reverse the order.
And we don't know.
What?
Would it be
So he
possible
says.
to reverse the
It's
order?
not necessary to give chalitza first because it's not because Rabbeinu Gershom lo gazar al yivama. A yivama and a arusa are not considered his wives le'inyan chen Rabbeinu Gershom. Okay. That's what we have here. Hold on 1 second. Okay, 1 second.
The commentary, since the v'chen, I only read the Shulchan Aruch without knowing that. Well, we just read the whatever that was. The
Okay.
I thought that chafbet, but I don't have it here because I was all confused.
Okay.
I thought that the chafbet was reading the sentence. Whoever's commenting at chafbet.
Which is what do you mean?
See, there's a siman that there's a commentary on the word v'chen arusa. I don't have Har'el on here. Meaning, the no say kalim on v'chein ba'arusa.
Yeah.
Whoever that chafbet is.
Right. Yeah.
I thought that they were reading the sentence that the v'chein ba'arusa was chal on the rabbeinu gershom b'chrim al hanoseh al ishto v'chein ba'arusa.
No, then the Ramah doesn't make sense. Right. So, right.
I'll have to go look at it.
Now, there's a tshuva here. It's interesting. The Chatam Sofer, okay, where the woman didn't want to agree to chalitza. Unless, okay, let's see. Imrotavi yikarim he'irud avar panay al davar bachur ben esrim.
Where are you?
The Chatam Sofer. It's right after that Mordechai. After that Mordechai. Al dat bachur ben esrim shana shenafla lefanav yivama.
Did you get Yonah?
Urechusha rav
Did you get Yonah?
minichsei achiv.
I did.
She has, excuse me. She has a lot of money, right? Urechusha rav minichsei achiv. V'hayavam rotzeh shetered imo l'dayanei Yisrael levatzei hariv odot nichsei achiv shaya ba'ala u'kefi shiru adayanim. He says, let's settle the finances. Right? There was a takanat kahal, okay, that they should split the money. Right? So she doesn't want. She says, "He misarevet ve'ena rotzeit b'chalitza elim kein yachlotz b'chinam." Okay, I don't agree they should be choletz me and hold this over me, free. Right? You're not suing me. If you tell me you're going to drag me to court, I don't agree to chalitza. What does he care?
Apparently he's married.
No, he's not married, but he wants to get married. So she thinks using here's the opposite case. She's going to use herem rabbeinu gershom to blackmail him. Don't take me to court. It's against takanat kahal.
I don't think she's looking for him.
No, because it's takanat kahal. She has the yerusha from the brother. There's takanat kahal that when there's a yerusha of the brother, they split it. She doesn't want to split it, right?
Yeah.
And she says, and I don't agree to chalitza. If you're going to try to enforce the takanat kahal, I don't agree to the chalitza, right? Ve'ena roseh b'chalitza, l'kem yachlotz b'chinam, ki chashva she'asur lo l'isa isha ad sheyachlotz tchila. והבחור נשתדך עם ההגונה לו, ושואל כעניין, אם מותר לו לישא משודכת שלו, right? And it shouldn't be over herem rabbeinu gershom. Here's the case, right? ושהיא יבמה, right? ועל זה תהיה מוכרחת לרד עמו לדין ישראל, כדי שיחלוץ לה. ומשמע, this is parenthetical, שאין ביד בית ישראל להעמיד על דת תקנת הקהילות. They don't have enough authority to impose the splitting of all the assets. Okay, so this. So he says, herem rabbeinu gershom.
What is the Torah law and what's the Dana Kehilot?
What?
What's the Torah law and what's the Dana Kehilot?
There's the takanat kehilot that in the case of yibum, that the woman is yoresh at half. From the brother died, right? So the woman gets half.
What if there are kids? What would the woman get?
I don't know. There are no kids. There would be no yibum if there were kids.
Well, I know, but I'm saying, what's the normative law about the woman inheriting from her father?
Al pi din Torah. So she's an almanah. She gets mizonot almanah, and she lives in the house. Whatever it is, that's what we did in the Gemara.
Why do we call this the takanat kehilot?
It was because there was a takanat
What's
kehilot.
the regular halacha in the case? That's what I'm trying to understand. Before
The regular halacha in the case that he would be yoresh. The brother would be yoresh.
Okay.
Right? So takanat kahal that they split it.
Okay.
So she doesn't want to split it. Okay? This is
She
where
wants all the money?
yeah. She said, don't sue me. I'm muchzeket in the money. I'm not going to give you chalitza if you want to split it.
Why was
Right? So she wants to use herem rabbeinu gershom. So can he do that? Right? So he says, this is actually very important the way he says it. Ulei mistafina. Let's see this case here. L'chadesh davar shelo izkiru ha'gaonim ha'kadmonim. Hava mina the Rabbi Gershom. Hareti came beit takanot. This is what we saw. And the two takanot are one is dependent upon the other, right? But the first takanot was not mugash bal korcha, and then in order to avoid kitata, he said that you can't have more than one wife. Okay. So now I'm skipping to where he applies it to this case. Okay. נמצא תקנתו שלא לגרש בעל כורחה, כלכלה היא על כן, חזר ותיקן, שלא לישא בית נשים. But I hava matzi megaresh bal kolcha. If it would have been possible for him to be megarish against the will, lo hava gazur. He wouldn't have made the gzeira of lo liso shtei nashim. In a case where it's